I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Cecelia Mecca. She's written 14 books in the historical romance and paranormal romance genres, and she lives in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Cecelia.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Plotting
Good.
a book as we speak, so it's nice to take a little break here with you.
Nice. And 14 books is quite a lot, isn't it? Compared to some.
Yeah, well, and a shorter time. So I've definitely learned since my first book, which took about 10 years. So I've been able to speed up the process quite a bit since then.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of pace that James Blatch is working at the moment.
Just about. Poor James. He'll never hear the end of it.
It'll only take him 140 years to match you at the moment. So that's good.
I love it.
Cool. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your books before we launch into the sort of 5 questions? Like what sort of thing you do?
Yeah, sure. So I started off historical romance, just finished my first complete series. So it's 10 books plus a prequel. And that wrapped up in April. So in the meantime, I launched my first paranormal romance. It's contemporary vampires, and which kind of has a crossover to my original series, which is set in medieval England and Scotland. So I have, an English and a Scottish knight and clan chief who later on in the new books are still feuding 700 years later. So it's a neat little crossover for those fans who, really haven't ever read historical or paranormal. I have 3 books in that series. And at this point, now that that's fairly established, my goal is to kind of go back and forth between the 2 genres. So
nice.
Yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Cool. All right, well, let's launch into the 5 questions. The first one is a tricky one. It's why do you write?
That is tricky.
Yeah.
Well, I always say I think every English teacher, or at least that I've met, is secretly a writer or an aspiring writer, and I definitely was. So I taught English for 15 years, was a curriculum specialist for 5 years. So basically writing and reading were my life and have been for as long as I can remember. And back when I was an English major in college, when I started my own book and never finished it, I had the dream then to become a writer. So it's pretty much been a lifelong thing, and I'm excited to have realized that dream in the last few years, and do this full time. But I've always been a reader, a huge reader. And so I think it's a very natural thing for me. And the fact that I can do it full time is still, pinching myself every day.
Nice. And was there a particular story that you wanted to tell? Sort of like romance novels, obviously.
Yeah. So, I was a medieval studies minor, and I've always been fascinated with medieval England specifically. And so, I was also a romance reader. I loved romance. I still do. Romance and fantasy are pretty much my 2 genres, although I can't imagine writing fantasy. I think you guys are amazing. The world building with the vampires was with the historicals was a lot of fun, but it's nowhere near as extensive as, the fantasy authors. So I like to read it. Can't imagine writing it. Maybe someday. You never should say never, I suppose. But combining those 2 things and having, the kind of fantastical elements to the historical period is just a lot of fun. So it's not quite so intense and as serious as maybe a historical fiction, which I also love to read. I could take a little bit more liberties, but I do love, researching that period and being able to kind of pull things in, that are true. So I basically take, like right now I'm writing a new series, which is based on kind of the formation of the Magna Carta. But if you read it, you wouldn't even know that. I know that, but my readers don't know that. They just know that there's barons, they're revolting and against a king that they, despise. And so there's undercurrents that are based in research, but it is a romance. So, we focus on the romance. So I just love being able to combine kind of 2 of my passions, reading romance and medieval England. So it's so fun.
Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're a self-published author. Are you hybrid?
No, I'm not hybrid. I actually got to the stage where I was about to pitch. I had a huge list of agents and thought I was going that route because I didn't honestly know much about self-publishing or indie publishing. I knew nothing about it, actually. So I was kind of going the traditional route. When you Google, or at least 5 years ago when you Googled how to publish a book, you have to get an agent kind of thing popped up. And, I met some authors at a RWA, which is Romance Writers of America. And they brought me to, quote, the dark side. As she said, she's like, I do have to ask a question, a fellow author who wrote Scottish historical romance. She said, I do this full time and I publish myself. And have you thought of that? And I was like, no. I found out what she made in the next breath. And I was like, well, wait, how do you do that? So I really kind of pivoted pretty much at that point.
Would you switch?
I'm sorry?
Would you switch to traditional publishing if
I've thought about it, and I think, that siren's call of the book on a bookshelf is kind of always there. But honestly, I don't know at this point, because the idea of spending time to find an agent and write a book that I'm not making 70% of the profits on, I'm not sure how I can do that. Every once in a while the thought pops into my head and then I pretty much quickly dismiss it. So I'm not going to say never, but at this point I don't have any plans to do so.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah. Well, question number 2 is, how do you write? And there's a few different, obviously, sub-questions to that. Mm-hmm. The first one being, are you a plotter or a pantser, as they say?
Yeah, I'm a pantser. What was pantser and now plotter. I've completely switched. My first book, or maybe 2 books, I really kind of went a little bit off the cuff. But as I learned about plotting, now I'm pretty much obsessed with plotting. So I'm trying StoryGrid for the first time with this book that I'm plotting right now, as a matter of fact. And I've never done that. So I don't plot scenes, but I do plot books. So I will kind of take a whole bunch of different plotting methods, whether it's, I started with Kathy Yardley. She has a great system, Rock Your Plot, I believe it's called, and then Romancing the Beat. And once I kind of got into plotting, there was, no turning back. And so now I kind of have a hybrid of 4 or 5 methods, but I'm constantly trying new ones to see what elements I could pull into my process. So like I said, StoryGrid is something I've always wanted to give it a shot. So I'm kind of incorporating that now. And what I'm really looking for is, do these methods have questions that I've never considered or that I've never answered with my book? Because my goal is to learn one kind of new thing for every book, so that, 10 years from now, maybe I won't have a perfect book. There is no such thing. But I figure, if we're improving with every book, that's a good thing. So I'm always kind of learning. So definitely plotting is on my radar because I enjoy it now.
Cool.
That said, I really only plot beats and characters. And then from there, the scenes kind of take it as they go. So that pantser is still in me for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a particular time and place that you prefer writing?
No, not really. I mean, once the kids are off to school, I'm pretty much writing all day, and I'm pretty disciplined. I would love to write on the beach. Next week, I'm heading to a beach vacation, and I've tried to convince my husband I'm more productive at the ocean, but hasn't worked 100% yet. I'm surrounded by trees here in Pennsylvania, so and I usually just write in my kitchen because there's chai nearby. So that's the normal writing. But if I had to choose, I'd write on the beach or on a cruise, but it doesn't always happen.
Just go on a 365-day cruise. Just
that
never
sounds great.
Okay, question number 3 is, are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
Yeah, so I am full-time. I became full-time after about 2.5 books. So, 2 books and then the prequel novella, which I wrote thanks to Mark Dawson. So I took the 101 course just as I was about to kind of hit publish. And when I did, I actually put the brakes on my publishing schedule, so to speak, and realized I wasn't 100% positioned. I came from kind of a blogging world. So the online platform I had down, blogging, website, I knew how to create a platform, but some of those other things that were specific to the publishing industry, like the lead magnet and such, I didn't have in place. So I actually stopped, wrote my prequel novella, built a little bit of a newsletter list, and then launched book 1. And by book 2, which came out, I'd say 3 to 4 months after book 1, I started to, make some progress. And because I was in education, I was off for the summer and just about to go back for September when, the books were starting to equal my income of education after 20 years. And so I said, do I really have to go back? And it started to kind of germinate in my head, like maybe I shouldn't. Slightly risky because, I only had 2.5 books in, and even though the income was starting to get there, I didn't know if I could sustain that, but I also didn't want to lose momentum. And I realized, worst case scenario, I have this degree, I could, go find another job. And so it was definitely a risk, but it paid off,
Nice.
In spades, because I'm about 2 years later and life is good. So.
Cool. Well, question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made and what have you got right?
Yeah, I think the most recent one, I jumped into paranormal romance and I did my research and, talked to a lot of people about switching genres. And some were nervous for me. They said, you're building this historical romance base. You've only got, you're a year and a half or so in. And they were genuinely nervous for me. But it was something I really wanted to do and I wanted to try it. So, the mistakes that I made there were just basically opinion. Like, I'll give you an example. Should I have a pen name or should I go with my name? And I talked to so many people that had done both. And really, it was kind of like that KU-wide thing. It's a 50-50 split. It works differently for everyone. You could make both work, but I chose to stay with my name. I think that was a mistake. So just recently, and it is not fun, switched all 3 books over, all the audio covers, the platform, the website, everything to a pen name. So yeah, I wish I had done that from the start, but it was one of those, which way should I go? And for me, I think I chose the wrong, my Amazon also bots were a mess. And so for the most part, I still have one newsletter, one reader group, but just separating them on Amazon, I think would have been smart. But it's one of those, you just don't know until you try. So I think everyone will make mistakes like that. And it's not even necessarily a mistake for everyone. I'm not saying, if you switch genres, have a pen name, because I was still in romance and that's kind of what led me to possibly keeping them together. But in retrospect, I probably should have went pen name from the start. So, oops.
Oh, well, it hasn't turned out too badly.
Yeah, no.
Cool. Well, the 5th and final question is, what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing?
Well, aside from taking, the 101 course, and I do have a lot of people that come to me and say, I would love to do what you're doing. I'd love to be a writer. Where do I start? I send them there because it's just a roadmap. Everything is right there. But start now, build a platform now. So, people say, well, how did you quit after 2.5 books? I probably put in, 10 years of building a platform online as a blogger before that. So that, I think, for me was really important. I didn't advertise back then. So when I published, I was really just using social media and using my platform to get the word out. Now I do advertise and I have AMS and Facebook ads, but I really didn't all that much at the time, very just jumping into it by the 2nd, maybe 3rd book. So I'd say build a platform, get that website, the newsletter, pick a social media or 2 that you feel comfortable with and are active on. And even if social media doesn't sell books necessarily, the organic social media, it definitely spreads the word about who you are and, the whole 7 touches thing. So I would start building a platform yesterday, even if you didn't write a word yet. And, by the time I had my first book, I had a newsletter, I gave away books in my genre and asked questions about historical romance and things that would be interesting to people that would read those books. And I definitely had a platform ready to go. And I think that was kind of what helped me along.
Cool. Yeah, we get a lot of people, us sending everyone at SPF questions about, is it too early to join the course or even too early to join like the Facebook group or anything, like the community? And we always say it's never too early to start because it's better to have all this in place for when you do launch your first book than to launch a book and then go, oh, that didn't work. What do I do
Absolutely.
now?
I couldn't agree more. It's never too early. And that's great advice, I think. So, and like I said, I just kind of ran into SPF 101 at the right time. But just yesterday, somebody asked me about that 101 course. It's not open at the moment, but I said, as soon as it is, I know you're just plotting your very first book, but just take it because you have the information in your head. So then as you're working through the process, you can kind of let it guide you. So.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's it. That's your 5 questions.
That was easy.
Yeah, not too painful. Thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, I'm happy to be here anytime, Tom.
Cool. That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing to support@selfpublishingformula.com using the subject line Self-Publishing Spotlight. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.